Good morning, everybody. Ross Allen Skorzewski coming to you live from the studio in Green Bay, Wisconsin at the Wellness Way. And we are ready for another 20 to 30 minutes of the Wednesday morning cup of crazy with me. It's been a great week so far. A lot of things happening, a lot of change on the horizon. And that is a beautiful thing, because if there isn't change happening in your life, then there's a good chance that you're probably really not focusing on yourself, especially when it comes to personal growth and development. Man, I tell you what, when you start messing with yourself, when you start going cerebral in the hopes that it comes down and impacts you in the heart that leads to action, yes, there should be change. And that leading us once again to the topic for today. When does real personal growth and development take place? And we're going to dive into that a little bit today, because I really, in talking with some of, with the doctors that I get the chance to mentor and talk to and dive into their life and even have them also dive into mine, there's this idea of just, man, when is it going to begin? When am I going to see real growth? When is it going to stop? When, all these fun questions. And I really want to dive into this a little bit, because I think that I know that it's me. I know that it's a few of the other docs that I get to work with. Not every single one of them, because a lot of them have the ability to really just power through just based on their personality and the amount of time that they've spent in personal growth and development already. So therefore, they have these kind of created, it's not natural habits, but they've been created. These habits that have had, like we talked about last week, intentionality versus spontaneity. When it comes to these personal growth tracks and these trajectories to continue to push ourselves, to better ourselves, it's intentional. But when you're intentional and you're daily with it, and you're going through your grind and your hustle or your routine, whatever the word is that you want to use, it leads to a pattern of habit. And that's why you've heard, even, years ago, they say, well, how long should somebody do a repeated pattern of behavior before it becomes natural, before it becomes like second nature to you? And some have said it's, well, 30 days, 31 days, 60 days. And I think that that's a great approach to have. The idea that we would do something consistently for 30 days and therefore it all of a sudden becomes natural habit, I don't think is a formulaic approach to success, because everybody is potentially just a little bit different. I think fundamentally the approach is right, but the idea that 30 days leads to success or 60 days leads to success in creating a natural habit of personal growth and development is a potential mindset that is going to set you up for potential failure, because you're going to look at that as the end goal. You're going to look at that as the means to an end, and therefore, if you don't have that so-called natural habit formed by then, discouragement comes in, or you're off to the next coaching book, or you're off to the next coaching seminar, or you're off to a place mentally where you psychoanalyze like I can do, and you can get so immersed in what went wrong that your ability to fail forward, like we talked about weeks ago, is really hindered. So before we get into this a little bit more and with some of my thoughts and my encouragements for this day, I want to take, once again, another cleansing sip of organic coffee. Here's to you. Cheers. Here's to another morning cup of crazy with me. All right. And now that we have partaken, let us get into this. I, first of all, want to challenge you with this, as I'm challenging myself with these very thoughts and statements, because as we've said, intentionality versus spontaneity, as we've talked about failing forward, we've talked about perspective, we've talked about mindset, we've talked about positivity, and pessimism versus optimism. In all of these things, a little hiccup here in the studio with some beautiful music playing, all of these wonderful things really at the end of the day come down to one thing. It's the three questions that we always pose here at the Wellness Way, that we first of all should pose to ourselves, and also that we push out to all the docs and the staff, but we also encourage us to take it home. It's number one, what are you doing to develop yourselves? Number two, what are you doing to develop your family? And what are you doing to develop others around you? I'm telling you, I'm just as guilty as at some of these questions when it comes to execution as a lot of people, because when it comes down to it, depending on your makeup, depending on your personality, when we start talking about priorities, like Dr. Patrick Flynn did in a few episodes ago, we start seeing that number one, we should have ourselves at number one. Number two, should, whether it should be like faith, well, then ourselves, and then our family, then our jobs, and then our hobbies and what have you. For some people, though, still, it's the hardest one to focus on and to really implement is the one that deals with us. So the idea of that one, this question that I pose, when does real personal growth and development begin? I want to change the approach to that question. I think that the question is wrong because in talking with some of the docs that I've had, they get super excited, like me. They get to a place where they're experiencing some success and they're experiencing this wonderful trajectory, and there's no hiccups, there's no bumps in the road, there's no adversities or trials that they get comfortable and they become a little complacent. And I too can become just like that, but in the midst of that, all of a sudden life changed because life is fluid. We don't get to always control what happens around us. We can to a degree, but sometimes there are these variables that come in. And I would say this, when does real personal growth and development begin? I think it begins when you change your perspective to, it's not so much as when does real growth happen, it's when you should change your perspective to, when am I potentially going to set myself up to realize that I've stopped because I've been focusing on something that should be happening right now versus looking at the long game. And to be honest with you, like I said, personality plays into this a lot. Do you overthink? Do you worry? Do you have fear? Like I can be consumed too. Or are you a person that is so forward thinking in their abilities to connect with the world that they're just focused on task, execution, that they forget empathy and sympathy and emotion and connection? Whatever your personality might be, I think that it's when does real growth begin? Well, it begins, number one, when you realize that it never stops. Number two, pain is always involved because growth really does bring about pain in one's life. If you are not at a place, if we said this a couple weeks ago, if you're not at a place where you're experiencing pain in your day-to-day strategy for personal growth, then there's something wrong. We've always talked about, individuals, well, I've got skeletons in my closet. Well, that's great, but what are you doing with those skeletons? What are you doing with those broken aspects, those broken mindsets, those past fears, those past hurts, those past offenses, mindsets? What are you doing with them? Well, a lot of people say, well, this is just, sounds redundant. Yeah, because a lot of time the redundancy of having to deal with the obstacles that get in our way of personal growth and development really come down to not so much these external influencers, it's really internal. It's us. It's what's going on inside of here. It's what's going on inside of here. And then when the world happens around us, when things kind of go awry, we aren't set up for success. And our mind takes us somewhere, and we really begin to question, well, am I even growing at all? And because we're experiencing pain, because we're experiencing strife, adversity, we're experiencing things that are uncomfortable. We heard something that we didn't like, and therefore that is now a defining moment that says, you're not growing. Real growth isn't being had. And I say, no, hold up here. Change your perspective. What if at that moment in time, in this growth strategy that you're on, that you've really been intentional? You've really been intentional with self-reflection and working on that first question, what are you doing to develop yourself? That you've been so intentional with it that it's stirring up patterns of behavior that you're actually having to be intentional with replacing. And I think it's still going to be from this day forward, the idea that we can consume personal growth information and just consume it, and therefore it's going to be this magical potion, this formulaic approach, the flip of a switch to automatic change without having to, I think, put to death the cycle of crazy that takes place in our lives, is setting us up for failure. I want to share a couple thoughts with you. And now I resonate with some of these thoughts, but at the same time, I want to challenge them because once again, personal growth and development is not formulaic. It's not the same for me as it might be for Lizzie, who's sitting here in the studio with me. there might be some similarities, the approach, but when it comes down to execution and action and having to actually overcome the past cycles of crazy. I'm not saying that she's crazy, I'm crazy. I'm not saying that you're crazy, but I'm saying that when it comes down to what it is that you have to overcome in your life, it's going to be different. If it's going to take a little bit of a different strategy, it's going to take a little bit more time and patience and perseverance, intentionality, but also forward movement. The idea that real growth is being had in your life is knowing that real growth is always taking place because you're moving forward. The growth stops when you stall. The growth stops when you fall into a rut or into a pit of despair or the woe is me. And hey, trust me, I know the woe is me. I know the pit. I've got a room down there. It's got an eviction sign on it, though, because I don't want to stay there when life goes awry. I just know, whether it's personal, whether it's home, whether it's relationships, whether life happened, professional, whatever. Ross just knows where he's been in the past. I've been being here at the Wellness Way, being out in the construction world in the church. There's been so many environments that I've been in that have been uplifting and enriching, but then there's also been times where I haven't allowed the true growth to come along because who got in the way? Me! And that's, sometimes these guys say, enough's enough. So when does real growth begin? It has begun, but I'm just not going to let it stop. And I'm not looking for a now time like, hey, by the way, you're amazing. Holy cow, something has really changed within you. Holy stinking cow, you are completely different. I know that that will come in time. I know that there are people that are saying, you are a different person now today than you were a year ago. And I celebrate that. Would I like the quick fix? Absolutely. Who wouldn't like the quick fix? If it was that easy, like we said, intentionality, versus spontaneity, everybody would be successful at personal growth and development. So think about this. There was a great article that I was reading. I was going through a bunch of things actually over the last week in preparation for what it was that I was going to talk about. Even though I knew where I was going to hone in, I just didn't have the exact title about it yet. And that's where I wanted to challenge the idea of where does the real growth begin? Because it starts with you first and foremost, and your perspective and your ability to endure thoughts from others, constructive critique, positive things that are said, negative things that are said, and actually just keep moving forward to keep you from falling into patterns of old. Even though you might go there for a period of time, your ability to get out of that pattern of old quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker is those defining moments that's saying, you're winning, don't stop, keep moving forward. Who cares what the rest of the world says, around you if it's negative, and they're always constantly bringing up your past hurts and your past offenses and your past, transgressions, but just keep moving forward because those are not meant to be defining statements that define you and cause you to stop and say, well, apparently I'm not growing. That's when your growth is stopped. That's when your growth is stopped. It never stops. I don't even think for someone like Tony Robbins, some of these great personal growth and development gurus, they don't have it figured out to the point where they've arrived in life. John Maxwell, they have great thoughts and great principles, but they've executed a lifestyle of just continual consistency and implementation on an intentional level of pouring into themselves and setting their day up for success because they realize that the day doesn't set the success up for them, that they set it up for themselves. And therefore, after years and years and years of consistency and seeing the fruits of their intentionality that they have now brought into their lives, what we would say is habit, is consistency, is a natural trajectory in life that is all about self-awareness. And they would say, well, I never want to go back to anything other than this because I like where I'm at. I just think a lot of people, myself can be included in that at times, is that we get frustrated with where we're at. We're frustrated because we don't see the growth happening as fast as we would like it. And the reality is, for a lot of us, it's taken years to get to where we are. So the idea that it's going to take one book or 1 month or one great thought to undo some of that stuff is crazy. Cut yourself some slack, learn how to have a little bit of peace in your life, and don't overanalyze, don't worry and fear, because I'm telling you, you do that, it's game over. It's game over. You know, it's just like you kick the side of the arcade game and all of a sudden it says tilt, and you got to start all over again. Anyways, this is from a site that says everything is within. And truly, to be honest with you, when we start talking about success, the ability to have wins, if you will, in personal growth and development really does start inward. It starts with us. That's why that first question is so key. What are you doing to develop yourself? And I like this. This is from Robert Spedinger. I hope I'm saying your name right. But it says why you should stop fighting against those unpleasant situations in your life and simply learn to accept them. Let's stop right there. Let's pause for a moment. I like this. I like it a lot, actually. I like the first part, but I wrestle with the second part because I think that when it comes to accepting things, we potentially set the stage for us to endure them and just to be complacent and say, oh, well, I guess it's just going to be what it is, right? I just have to accept this. And I think those types of mindsets, even though I understand his intent, in just this simple title, the idea that we have to accept where we are leads to a limiting mindset that potentially sets the stage for the cycle of crazy to repeat again tomorrow because I just accept it. I just take it for what it is. It is what it is. And like I said, que sera, sera, whatever will be, will be. And it's just, I think, crazy because that's not real growth. Just accepting things for the way that they are and not changing and willing to potentially challenge the way things are and go inward and reflect and listen to what others are saying around you, even if you don't like it. And then looking for truth in the midst of that, instead of accepting, challenging it, own what needs to be owned, look for truth, hone in on it, and then create a plan. And get out of frustration to action as quick as possible, okay? Here's some of the thoughts that they're saying, and it's okay. This is all right. Stop fighting and get at peace with your current situation. Sure, love it. What does peace look like for you? The absence of frustration? What is peace? The absence of adversity? Fighting, I get. Stop fighting. Stop worrying, stop fearing, stop putting more energy into something that is maybe, that concept of, well, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. And some people, if you're more of an internal thinker like myself, yeah, sometimes we're prone to doing so, and we overanalyze, and we get to a place of paralysis by analysis, and that fight, that commitment to just dive into that takes more energy out of us, and it drains us. So I get the idea, yes, get to a place where you can have peace and experience peace. But when you get to that place where you find peace, don't just succumb to acceptance. Challenge that which potentially continues to keep rearing its head. And the acceptance of saying, well, maybe it's not the other individual's fault. Maybe it's not the situation's fault. Maybe it's not anybody else's other than mine. And then get to a place where you put together an action plan to see that, I'm going to use it again, cycle of crazy doesn't just keep showing up to where you just have to accept it and move on. I know that's not what he's saying, but I know a lot of times when people read things, they pull from it what they want to hear. And that's, I'm telling you, another potential mindset in its own right that potentially sets the stage for a major, major, major derailment in our intentionality when it comes to personal growth and development. Reading something, hearing something, misunderstanding it, taking it in a way that it wasn't meant to be, and then therefore going to the assumption factory, putting on your hard hat and walking out with a grudge, walking out with an attitude, or walking out with a woe is me. Well, how do you know all this stuff? Because I've been there and I understand it and I know how it goes, okay? Get clear about what you really want in life. That I like. That I really do like. Get clear about what you really want in life. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are watching this as well, get clear about what it is you really want in life. And for some people, that is going to be a daily task. That's a daily wrestle. Get clear about what you want in life. Like we talked about last night, intentionality, right? We talked about the idea that in the middle of intentionality, you have to find purpose. And when you find purpose, you're able to actually execute what that plan of intentionality looks like. Once again, just because you have a plan and you know what your purpose is in the plan and you have your action steps doesn't mean just because you came up with it leads to immediate success. It's called start walking. It's called just get to the place where you put into motion what it is that you are wanting to get out of life. Yeah, use peace, but just, I'm loving a lot of this, but it causes me to wrestle with some of it because I want to challenge it. Yes, 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 and yes. Here, listen to this. Fighting against something means you are focusing a lot of energy on something you don't like. And the more you focus on something, the more of it you create. So true. No matter if you're focusing on something you want or something you don't want. What is the amount of emotional time and energy that you are spending towards something that should be spent in other areas? And that's, I really understand that, okay? Here's the one point that I will end up here. So stop fighting, stop struggling, take a few steps back, calm down. Your current situation is your own creation. It's the result of your past thoughts, feelings, and actions, but this also means whatever you do today will create your own tomorrow. Love it. Okay. Little window into Ross's world. One of the hardest things that Ross has been able to really actually get in his life throughout the years, I would say honestly, from my teenage years, as I went on a little self-disclosure a few episodes back, talking about where a lot of my broken thinking really started in high school. Actually, it was not even high school. It was right before junior high. This idea that I became very familiar with failure, these broken messages that were spoken over that I really began to allow to become defining statements. Yes, stop fighting against that stuff. Stop struggling and take a few steps and back down. A lot of this is not a result of other people, because I didn't have to let those become defining statements, but I did, right? So it really comes down to what amount of time am I going to spend on something that is going to take more emotional energy out of other areas of life that should keep me moving forward versus causing me to stall out. And sometimes, yeah, life is fluid and it can change completely with only a few days or weeks. When you fight against what is, then you will create more of it. That's why I kind of thought a little bit of this is, well, just accept it. Just take a few steps back, calm down a little bit and accept it for what it is. Well, I mean, if I get to a place, because I know me, if I get to a place where I just accept it, I know where my mind goes. Where does your mind take you? If you were to challenge that thought, okay, fine. A part of a personal growth development strategy for us is when life happens, because it's fluid and sometimes it's out of our control, but a lot of times it's really in our own personal control. What is your concept of accepting and calming down and creating an intentional strategy to get out and to move forward and to put to death that cycle of crazy in your life? For me, it comes down to statements, these constructive critiques that are made over me, especially from people that have the right to make them. There's a time when someone said to me, Ross, I don't think it's your ability that you failed. Sometimes you just get so caught up in your own thoughts that your ability to see tomorrow or to think forward is hindered because you're so into a thought process and that all you see is the now. And I was like, holy crap, who are you to say that over me? You don't know me. And I had to stop myself real quick. I didn't like it, right? Some people say things that you don't like, but there's truth right smack dab in the middle of it. And that is what you need to hone in on versus the sting of the statement, right? And you begin to, yes, then you take a few steps back. Because Ross's normal trajectory in life would have led him to a place of emotionally overreacting and saying something to defend. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. But you get to a place where you take it in and you filter it properly. And real growth in the midst of that would say that, Ross is growing because he shut his pie hole. He didn't respond. He didn't react. That happens at times when, when the redhead and I get into arguments at home. Sometimes Ross just needs to shut up and listen, right? And she's like, well, you're 43 years old. We've been married for 23 years. Why is it working now? Because I'm intentional with shutting this, because I want to grow. I want us to grow. I don't always have to challenge. But when you have those moments spoken over your life that are potentially challenging where you're at today, look for the truth. You want to know where real growth really begins, I think, is when you can take constructive criticism that comes your way and it doesn't debilitate you. It causes you, yes, maybe to get quiet and to step back and to reflect and to go inward, but then to hone in on the truth, but then to accept it, but not to be accepted for, well, I guess it's as good as it gets. I guess this is going to define me for the rest of my life, and I guess this is just going to be what it is, right? And that's not where Ross is going to stay. That's not where you're going to stay. Accepting it looks at it and is accepting it and taking ownership of it. Responsibility, and then putting the action plan, then getting busy, then keeping that forward trajectory, like we talked about a couple weeks ago, failing forward. Don't let it define you. These things, even that statement, to hear it stung, absolutely. But the absence of pain in personal growth and development is not a realistic mindset to embrace, because there's going to be pain. There's going to be moments of great trial and great stress. But what is going to come out of that? I believe through intentionality, with glimpses of spontaneity, through failing forward, through proper mindset, through continued growth, that what comes out of some of the greatest moments of stress and pressure, adversity, trials, whatever that might be, could potentially become the continual revelation of not only self-awareness and who you are, but really, truly putting in front of the world on display continually every day the best representation of who you are and who you're meant to be. That's your Wednesday morning cup of crazy, ladies and gentlemen. That's it. That's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful word of encouragement for all of us, but yet at the same time, it's meant just as much for me as it is for you. Take this, implement this into your life. Think about it when it comes to approaching how you talk to your kids, how you talk to your spouse, how you talk to your, whatever that might be, right? And continue to encourage, continue to come alongside. And, that's what I like even about that statement that was said to me. As much as it hurt, I had to think about it. It's like some of the most important and influential people in your life are those who are going to cause you great pain. And when it comes to them making statements that potentially cause you to go inward and reflect and go, oh, holy crud, it is me, you're right, then do something with it. Don't accept it. Find a place of peace. Then get busy. Let that inner fire fuel you towards an action plan of continued personal growth and development. You guys are awesome. I see a lot of you on here. Janelle Marie, good to see you again this morning. Mom, I see you. Thank you always for kind of hopping on. Heather Reed, good care. Good to see you. Mim Smith, always a pleasure to see a lot of you. And you know what? I thank you guys for coming in and sharing this Wednesday morning cup of crazy with me. I've even got Dr. Jeremy Shingen from our Fond du Lac office on here, just doing life with him. And he's a guy that I love having great conversations with, because he knows too, when it comes to personal growth and development and strategies, that sometimes life does happen and you got to take the curveballs as they come. But it doesn't mean because you swing and miss, that you're out of the game. You just learn how to potentially find the sweet spot to hit that curveball the next time it comes your way, right? But that's intentional. So with all that, Ashley Balls, a lot of you guys, thank you so much for joining in. Crystal, all of you, I appreciate it so much. With that, hey, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next week for the next Wednesday morning cup of crazy with me. See ya.